Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Human SOS Show. We're actually on episode 90, headed down towards getting to 2 years coming up soon. So, pretty exciting. We've been at this for a while, looking forward to starting the new year with everyone. And today we want to, in case you were looking for fodder for the New Year's resolutions, we're going to talk about how our diet, our eating habits affect our performance. Thus, the question of uh, are you a donut away from being in peak performance? So, as you join us, be sure to let us know where you're joining from, and definitely want to hear from you with questions and comments. So, Anton, you want to kind of dig into it and open it up for us?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of the day it is for you. But before we even talk about, what we're eating, what we're putting in our body, nutrition, and things like that, let's first establish the concept of having a good baseline. We've talked about this numerous times on the show over the last few weeks, and it's just understanding that we don't have a good comparison, good contrast to what's great. We kind of get used to being good enough. So when I hear people say, "Oh, I'm good with eating that," or "I'm good with skipping breakfast," or "I'm good with, just getting not eating till dinner," I go, good compared to what, right? What are you baselining? What are you measuring it against to be able to say that? And usually people don't have that. Usually people go, well, I get through the day fine. I get my tasks done fine. But what if you actually felt great versus good, or you felt amazing versus good enough, whatever it may be? That's just something that I want to challenge everybody to think about. But starting out with nutrition, this there's this really big fad right now that I'm seeing from Instagram predominantly, and these people are like, all you have to do but worry about diet is not eat enough, not eat too much. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we went away from this 20 years ago, and now we're circling back around to it, and it's a bunch of people that are even younger than me and in really great shape. They got this young metabolism, and they're going, well, a calorie is a calorie. If I eat 100 calories of pizza, or I eat 100 calories of meat, or 100 calories of kale, for what it may be, it doesn't matter to my body. It just burns down the calories, and I just shake my head and I go, sure, maybe to your waistline it doesn't matter that much, but what about your cellular health? What about your brain performance? What about all those other health concepts that are so vital to us thriving as human beings on a daily basis, whether it be at work or at home? And it just gets such a bit bad pushback from them, and that's because our society's become a lot of YouTube gurus that go pick up a YouTube video, and all of a sudden they're ready to tell people what to do. So I just want you all to be cautious of that, because there's a lot of that spreading out there. I'm even seeing this spilling over to LinkedIn now, and people talk about it on here. So just be cautious. Not everything is the same. Just because you put the same amount of food in your body, it doesn't mean it's going to do just good to your body, or it's not going to do damage to your body. What are your thoughts on that one, Kev?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to welcome Aaron. Glad to have you back, Aaron. Appreciate you being here. And Suzette, glad to have you here with us as well. Yeah, the concept you speak of fits in a big category. Let's find a one size fits all way to do everything. And if we can do that, then we can make everybody happy. We'll make our next $1 million. All we got to do is find that secret formula or secret recipe, and we know enough that our bodies are unique, and that we know enough that there's some foundational pieces, and so this thing of, well, let's just all do it this way is as foolish as anything around. And we've proven this over and over. Why we keep trying to do it, I don't know, but I don't know if that's led by people like me that would love to have the best formula just to plug stuff in, or if it's people think, okay, well, if I can do this, package it, I can sell it and make big money. I don't know. But yeah, it's definitely an issue. Um, and
And
one of the things come to my mind, Anton, as you opened up talking about baseline. What's a good way for people to develop a baseline to even understand what they're dealing with and how to then go forward.
Well, it's kind of understanding what good is, right? We've come to accept good as a, good is always relative, but good compared to a scientific baseline, right? So like, for example, you should wake up with energy. You should not have food cravings throughout the day. You should be able to focus. All those things tie right back into your nutrition and things like that. Your moods, your emotional stability should not be up and down throughout the day. There's so many different baselines to talk about, but just do some research on this, and see how you're feeling. Now, as an example, they can even take our assessment. I think in our assessment
Mm,
there is, 5 questions they can answer specifically on nutrition to gather their baseline there. But just at the same time, also talk to people around yourself. Talk to people, think about how you were maybe when you were younger. And people are like, oh, I'm getting older, things are different. I'm like, trust me, I know people in their 70s that are still feeling amazing, moving amazing, doing
hmm
things in a great way because their diet is impeccable. These folks, do everything in a really good way. Now, here, let me just also touch on this. You don't need to measure, weigh all your food in order to have a healthy diet. Like, this is another one of those things that, the Instagram of the world is pushing out there, and they're like, well, everybody needs to know their macros. Macros are, if those that don't know, it's the percentages of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats that you eat in a day. And it basically says, some guru out there sits down and goes, well, in order for you to be at your best, this is the macros you should focus on. And I'm going, this person eats McDonald's 5 days a week. Why is it that we're worried about their macros right now, which is the most fine-tuned level that would work within a professional athlete with, or a high-level athlete with? And you're starting with that. Once again, coming back to your one-size-fits-all formula, Kev, where people are like, well, if you eat these macros, everything's going to be great. And then people realize they don't know how to coach very well. So they're like, well, don't worry about the quality of food. Just make sure that you fit the right amount of macros and everything's going to be okay.
hmm
Like I said, maybe your waistline's going to get thinner. Maybe you're going to lose a little weight, and that's a big maybe. But the reality is you're not going to get healthier. It's just not going to happen. So, start with basic changes. Change number one, when we're talking about peak performance, are you drinking enough water? Like,
hmm
that's so simple, but like I'm telling you folks, there's so many of these people that are focused on all of these crazy things that they got to do for their diet, but they're not putting enough water in their body. So as a bare minimum, one half of your body weight in ounces of water is what you should be putting into your body. For me, I'm about 200 pounds, so I usually drink about 100 to a gallon, 100 ounces to a gallon a day. And for me, I have to have a big jug, like I'm looking at it right now to the side. Otherwise, I'll forget. Like, I just can't sit there and measure the small little glasses of water. So I'm like, okay, I got to drink 3 of these jugs. That's my gallon. We're good. How you do with water intake, Kev? You do good with it?
Yeah, that's something that is really funny because this goes back to probably the 90s. Came across an article in Reader's Digest of all things that talked about that most people are going around partially dehydrated all the time, and they talked how some of the effects, and they said if you are fairly sedentary, well, not sedentary, low activity levels in your life, the half ounce per pound of body weight was the baseline. Said if you're really active, that you really should use 2/3 of an ounce per pound of body weight to truly be to truly be hydrated. And so as a result, I really have always pushed to maintain hydration. Plus, with my medical training, I have over the last several years had more than one occasion where people start having problems. They get dizzy and feel like they might pass out, different headaches, different symptoms. Come to find out, it's all because they were partially dehydrated. They weren't to a point, like they were out in the desert with nothing to drink for days, but their hydration level was down, got busy, didn't think about it. It wasn't intentional. It just, we get busy and forget, and sit them down in a chair, check them out a little bit, but hand them a bottle of water. And as soon as they start consuming some water, get a bottle or two in them, all of a sudden, magically, they're feeling better. And so, yeah. And if we're fully hydrated, it also affects our appetite. It will cause us to uh, have less craving, less desire for stuff we don't need. And what we do eat, it helps our body process that better. So yeah, that's a such a critical piece, and one that's so easily overcome. Now, initially, when you start being fully hydrated, you're going to have a hard time walking by a bathroom for a while till your body gets accustomed to it. But after that, you'll feel better than ever before. Uh, and it's a good baseline. Don't use this and say, "Oh, well, this is going to fix everything." No, it's not going to fix everything, but it's a good starting place. That's a good baseline to work from.
Mhm. And like I think you answered your own question there. It's the best way to get a baseline is to do the right thing for a while and see how you feel and measure that out and then record
Mm,
it. Document it in a journal. Write down your thoughts, write down your feelings, write down your energy levels, all those different things, and then see how that changes over time. That's spot on. I love that. You've been doing that since the '90s. That's awesome. But yeah, it's like in Phoenix, Arizona. If you're working outside, a gallon a day isn't going to do it. You're going to
mm-mm.
at least two because you're sweating more than a gallon out just by being outside so much when I was living there. The other thing is that, we're just touching on some high level things. If you guys have any specific questions or if you have comments, feel free to chime in. I'd love to know what you guys do personally to try to stay healthy, right? What kind of things are you putting in your mouth? What kind of focus points do you have to ensure that your body's getting good nutrition for performance? One of the biggest other, pet peeves or whatever things that I'm not a big fan of is people under eating. That's a
Mm.
big thing right now that like people they go in these diets and we did really poorly over the holidays and now we're going to go and starve our bodies into trying to lose weight. And it works initially and then it stops because your body adjusts. Your body will down regulate its metabolism in order to stay in a state of perceived starvation longer, be able to need less calories throughout the day. So what ends up happening is folks that starve themselves for diets, and there's nothing, I'm not saying anything's wrong with having a deficit throughout the day, right? Say your body consumes, I've measured my metabolism before. I'm consuming about 2,200, maybe 2,400 calories per day at rest. So like if I didn't do a single thing and I laid in bed all day long, my body would consume 22 to 2,400 calories. Then you got to add in activity, functioning, and doing things like that. So probably if I were to break even, I would probably say somewhere around 27 to 2,800 calories, like is probably my break even point. But what do people usually do? They go on these 1,500 calorie diets, 2,000 calorie diets, and the deficit is too big. So if you are trying to lose a little weight, go into a small deficit. Go by about 200 up to 500 calories daily. Don't go over that because your body will adjust. And take a look at a dieter, right? People that diet historically over their life. Usually over time they gain weight. That's the sad truth about
Mm.
dieters because they crash their metabolism and it's kind of like this up and down thing. But if you look at it over time, it's up and down, but in a positive correlation, meaning it's going up with a mirror effect. It is jumping up there. So that's something that I tell people: if you want to perform, give your body the fuel that it needs, and that comes from calories. It comes from giving you enough energy to consume in order to be able to do that.
The one of the things that I'm seeing a lot of, and want to get you to talk about, is um, this new fad of intermittent fasting, and that's supposed to be the latest greatest thing. And I'm not saying that fasting is not of value, because there are times and seasons where we do fasting, and it's of necessity, but that's not a day to day normal thing. I don't think. Your thoughts on that one?
Intermittent fasting is not new. It's been around. It's been around for a while. It's like a thing with human nutrition. It just keeps circling back around. I've done intermittent fasting myself. I do it once in a while. Um, it's not for everybody. Let's just say that. It's a tool. It's not a complete system, right? It's a way of eating, but you can still end up eating all the wrong things. You can still end up, hurting your body in the process. You can hurt your hormones. One of the things that
Mm.
I've worked with a lot of women in my life, predominant, I would say probably 75% of my clients over time were women, and usually women that had hormonal issues, people that just they couldn't work with traditional coaches, so they would come to me because I had a little bit more background in physiology and things like that. So a lot of them end up hurting their hormones, specifically their thyroid, with intermittent fasting. Their thyroid may already be challenged, and they're doing this, and somebody told them that it's good for them, and it ends up actually hurting them. So intermittent fasting, there's also like the benefits of it can be achieved in other ways. It
Mm,
just makes it honestly easier for people to control their caloric intake because a lot of these windows are, like a 24, meaning like 20 hours of not eating, 4 hours of eating. When I did it pretty strict. I did 21-3. So I did 3 hours of eating, 21 hours of not eating. That one's actually tough, like because it's hard to get enough calories. It's hard for me to get 3,000 calories in 3 hour window. Sometimes I would just have to eat the whole 3 hours in order to get there. But the point is, it's what they're trying to do with intermittent fasting is they're trying to mimic how we were prehistorically, right? We got up, we hunted for our food, we gathered our food, then we usually had one big meal, and then we went into the cave or whatever it is that we were doing. So that's kind of the concept where it comes from. There is research from Harvard University that talks about intermittent fasting. It's a age management doctor. He's one of the leading researchers in his field for like how to get us to live longer, basically. And he says there's three things that are been studied and contribute to us living longer: intermittent fasting, cold temperatures, and high intensity exercise. Those are the three things that science has proven in research that it actually extends our life. So it's not bad when it's done correctly, but it's challenging. Let's just say that it's really challenging. I think that intermittent fasting is kind of like it's kind of like I was saying with nutrition. When before you worry about how you're eating, how often you're eating, what times you're eating, are you eating the right quality of food first? Start with that. Like if you're eating junk food all the time and you're intermittent fasting, you're saying, "Oh, I'm doing great because I eat McDonald's, for 3 hours a day and nothing else." Not a good plan. That's not going to lead to your performance. So I would say first start with quality instead of worried about that.
yeah, one of the things that's always concerned me, and I've had quite a journey looking at diet and eating habits and things because I am one of those that does not naturally have a high metabolism rate. My metabolism rate is on the slower side, so I've always been challenged. But the famous food pyramid. Well, you got to eat this portion of this, and everybody should do that. And that's always bothered me because I think that even you mentioned this Harvard study. First thing comes to my mind is, yeah, that's dealing with the hunters, but what about the farmers? Their habits, their needs are going to be different based on lifestyle. So for us to say, everybody should do these things and that's going to fix everything is a dangerous place to go. And it's not only true around diet, it's around all of life. And so that always troubles me. And that's why I encourage people to do research, look into ways to begin to understand their physiology and how to figure out what are the right combinations of food. And it doesn't mean that you just go crazy and eat everything just because you are trying to figure it out, but be intentional in looking into this so that you understand what your body needs. And it's not usually going to be found in a single book or a single plan because I've done those. I did the Atkins and accomplished weight loss without any problem because I basically eliminated any carbohydrates. There's a problem with that even me with my makeup, I still need carbohydrates. I just need to consider which ones I take in when and so on. And so uh, first thing, if you'll just start with the idea that you cannot go and do what everyone else is doing and it worked for you, just like we talk about this in other areas. People that give you the 5 easy steps, the 7 easy habits kind of stuff will work. What I've observed, about 30% at best of the people that do it get the desired result. The rest of the folks get something, and many of them get nothing, and some of them it actually works against them. And so, this with our diet, don't go with this like the food pyramid. I know I'll probably make some dietitians mad by saying this, but the food pyramid is a guide. I get that, but it's not the answer for everyone to just go and eat this percentage of this and two of those and three of that. That's not the ticket, and hope people will become intentional to figure out. Back to what you said, let's figure out what good, how we can go from good to great. Let's not accept good. In fact, I had a seminar that I went to years ago, and it said good is the enemy of excellent. And so true in our eating. Yeah, we can survive, but can we be excellent even in our eating to a point that we're excellent in how we feel and perform and so on?
Hmm. No, and the food pyramid, it was influenced when it was created, and you have to be careful with stuff like that. And I love what you said, that there's not one size fits all for everybody. These are tools, folks, right? They're
Mm,
intermittent fasting, paleo, keto, you name a different diet, different way of eating, macros themselves. They're just tools. And each situation, each person is going to need a different set of tools.
hmm
It's like trying to get a welder to use carpenter's tools isn't going to work very well for that welder. Like that's not the right set of tools for them. So we want to make sure that are able to apply the right stuff. Food pyramid, throw that thing out the window. It's not good. So that's why when I talk about this stuff, I talk about very general things, right? I'm not getting into specific details of things, because that's an individual conversation. You need to sit down and say, what are your likes? What are your dislikes? What's the best diet out there? The one that you're going to keep. I mean, that's the reality, right? The one that you can actually sustain. I don't care how great, some guru told you this diet is, but if you can only last on it for 2 weeks, you feel deprived, and then you go and binge after that. Not a good option. So something that's only maybe got 10% of variance, 10% of change for you, but now you can sustain that. Now over time, that 10% can change and get bigger and bigger and bigger, or different things can vary, but don't change a lot. One thing that I'll say for folks, when you're trying to eat well for performance, don't run from negative foods, chase positive foods.
mm,
It's something that our brain, responds better with. When you look at science of behavior change, we
mm,
do not do as well of avoiding the negative as we do as chasing the positive. So for example, if somebody says, stop eating sugar so much, right? I want to, I got to eat less sugar. Well, we want what we can't have. So if you put that in your mind and you said, I can't have sugar, now you're craving sugar all the time, even more. It's like I joke about this, like a boyfriend or girlfriend you had in high school, you didn't like him anymore, but they broke up with you first. You're like, oh no, come back to me. It's that psychology of it. So instead, chase the opposite.
mm,
So if you're seeing that you're having a lot of sugar cravings, and trying to avoid it, eat a lot of protein and fiber. So
mhm.
chase those kind of things, making sure that with every meal you're getting a protein and a fiber. And that would be like a foundational piece of advice that I would give to anybody for nutrition. It's not very specific, but I would be hard pressed that there would be a lot of people that could argue, if you eat more protein and more fiber, you're going to have less sugar cravings. It's going to be good for your energy, because those are much more tougher to break down nutrients. They're much more nutrient dense. That's one of the things that I'd recommend. The other thing I would talk about too is chase nutrient density, right? So like a French fry doesn't have high nutrient density. It means amount of calories, not calories, amount of nutrients, good quality nutrients per gram. So like spinach is super nutrient dense, right? But a potato is not as nutrient dense, because it's heavier, has a lot of starch, but doesn't have a ton of nutrients. An egg, super nutrient dense. So look for things like that when you're trying to chase your performance, because we got a gas tank, right? His belly can hold only so much. So we want to make sure that we're putting the best fuel possible in there, so that way throughout the day we're performing good with that fuel utilization.
Welcome, Zaid. Glad to have you as always. Appreciate you being here. I want to throw out a question to those that are watching right now, and that is, have you ever tried any of the diet programs? And what was your experience with them? I mentioned one earlier. I did the Atkins diet, and it's got a kernel of truth to it for some of us. And I lost weight, but again, it was two problems with it. One, it didn't take a healthy, holistic look. Secondly, it's not sustainable. One of the things that we have to consider with any kind of diet change, whether it's a program whatever it is, you've got to ask yourself the question, can you make this a part of your life, a permanent change? Because if you don't, for example, we talked earlier about drinking water and being hydrated. Uh, this one's important enough that you need to figure out a way to make it sustainable in your life. Like Anton said, his way is to he's got a large container that he keeps around with water in it, and knows that the goal is by the end of the day to have finished off 3 of those. And so it's important enough that with water that we figure out a way to make it sustainable. But in terms of how we look at quantities of food, types of foods, things like that, we need to figure out what we can implement in our life that will become an everyday part of our life. And that's a key part of this. When we do that, then we bring about a permanent change in our diet so that it's sustainable. So we don't end up in a year down the road having said, okay, well, I survived to this point. Now I can just do whatever I want. And then we balloon up and are typically in a worse state than when we started. So consider sustainability. Let's see. Let's see what Aaron has to say. It says, as a fitness expert in the industry, I get asked about diet often. We have to be cautious about those who have eating disorders. They will cling to our very words, so general recommendations are legally provided for their mental well-being. Sure. Yeah, Anton, your thoughts, because I know you've lived in that world for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the pillars of nutrition that we focus, even in a perspective force, when I talk about this stuff, is relationship with food. It's a really big one. We're conditioned in all sorts of wrong ways to have poor relationship with food. We look at foods as evil, bad, and not that's not true. In moderation, you can have a donut. In moderation, you can have, some soda once in a while. Like, those things are not going to kill you. It's not the end of the world. But with folks that Aaron's talking about, that's even, it's even worse. These people have a horrendous relationship with food that ties into some emotional issues down the road, down the pipeline somewhere. And we have to be very, very careful with what we recommend. And I've worked with some of these people. I all know by any means not a dietitian. So if they're really complex cases, sometimes, I've passed them off. But it's really, yeah, she brings up a really good point. You have to be careful what you say. And this is why, like, even right now when we're talking, everything's general. Everything's very like high level, because without knowing the person, without knowing their individual needs, their individual thought process, their likes, their dislikes, their trauma that may have, happened in their life that now is being solved by food, you can't give advice. It's kind of like, financial advice, right? When people talk about financial advice, they always give a disclaimer at the end. I feel like nutritionists and people that talk about health these days should give similar disclaimers, like, hey, this is what worked for me, but this may not work for you. It's whatever it is. But no, I definitely agree.
Yeah, that again, it goes back to none of us need to look for that one magic bullet in our life to fix everything. We have to approach it mindfully. And one of the things we need to do, in fact, what I would encourage people, I talked yesterday in regards of New Year's resolutions. I think the best place to start is, before we make a specific resolution, figure out what's going on with us, get that baseline in other ways. And and that will be the key that we can begin to be able to find what is our baseline, not what is the latest trend or whatever. And that's included in all areas of our lives, including our diet. I mean, we just need to be mindful and quit trying to look for a way to coast through life. I think that's the big problem, is everybody, it feels like that they should be able to just get to a point they can coast through life. And I don't think that is what we are designed about. And so be mindful. One of the things that I have suggested to people as I started the Wisdom Seeker Live podcast is there's a simple exercise that works in a lot of different ways. One, that exercise is to disconnect from noise and distraction around us. Okay, get away from those things one way or another. Whatever you do, however you do that. Second, once you're in that state, observe. Observe what's going on around you. Observe what's going on inside you. And then the third step is to, based on what you observe, then seek out and gain wisdom. And when we do that in the area of our diet, we have a better chance of finding out what it is that is our baseline. What will help us feel excellent rather than, yeah, I'm good. Well, if you're satisfied with good, that you've got to make that choice. But if you ever experience excellent, great, what we, another term I like to think of is what we call abundance. When you walk in that, if once you experience it, you don't want to go back, but you got to get there first to even have perspective on it. Good morning, Rick. Glad to have you with us. Suzette understands sometimes our schedules require us to take off. But for those that have just come on board, we're just discussing diet. And, the big thing is, do you want to just get along and be good? Or would you really like to be healthy as possible and feeling great and have that energy level? And I know one of Anton's favorite things is the body affects the mind and the soul and the spirit, and the mind and the soul and the spirit affects the body. And we got to recognize that relationship too. So, Anton, talk a little bit about that as far as diet goes.
Yeah, of course. So as for example, right, we talk about everybody's chasing happiness today, which is great. I'm excited for it. But we have to remember that happiness is actually a chemical state. Like that's something that our brain then interprets and says, okay, we are happy right now. And there is a specific chemical, serotonin. Most people kind of heard serotonin. It's a neurotransmitter, and it's produced predominantly in our stomach, in our digestive tract, is where 80% of serotonin, 80 to 90, depends on research study that you look up, is produced. So what happens is when we are eating poorly and we are not giving good quality nutrients to our body, our digestive system starts to hurt, right? I'm not even talking about building blocks of things. I'm just talking about the function of itself, not the, the supplies you put into the power plant, but what the actual power plant, how it's working itself. When the digestive system starts to go because we're abusing it, we're putting foods that, not necessarily the best, but it's just in the quantities that they shouldn't be in, and frequencies that they shouldn't be in, we start to hurt our digestive lining. And when that lining starts to be hurt, it starts to throw off function. And all of a sudden, people start to have depression issues because they're just not eating well, right? And we're sitting here and we're discussing the emotion aspect of it, which was really important. You have to deal with your emotions, but nobody's touching the nutrition aspect of it. Nobody's talking about how to get that power plant rebuilt to produce the right chemical to make our brain feel happy. So that's something that, as an example of what we need to do in order to make, to fix things or to get things better. But, that's a lot more advanced stuff. That's the stuff that people should probably, not start with worrying about, leaky gut and all those kind of things. Just recapping this for folks that maybe just joined. Start with the basics. Start with your water intake. Make sure you're getting enough water. Start with frequency of eating. Make sure that you're eating regularly throughout the day. It's one of those things that don't skip meals. Skipping meals, unless you have a dialed in nutrition plan that works for you and that's all good. Skipping meals, I don't care what the excuse is. It's not good for you. Your body's going to be thrown off. Your blood sugar is going to be thrown off. Your hormones are going to be thrown off because of it. And so many different things happen. So then chase nutrients. Chase the positive. Try to get as many positive green leafy vegetables, colorful vegetables in your body as you can. And nobody said you need to go and do that every single meal. Can you have one more vegetable today than you did yesterday? Like, great, go celebrate that win and see if you can do that for a week before you try to go and adapt some of these much more fancy things out there, right? Like, find ways to incorporate it into your diet and just see how you feel. get addicted to good. When you get addicted to good, you see why these changes that you're making that may not be easy are worth it. It's something that I'm constantly driving for all the clients that I work with. I'm like, we have to remind you what you're fighting for. We have to remind you of what you're going through changes for, right? And if you can't remember that and you can't feel it, it's tough.
Yeah. Um, I appreciate your bringing back to the 10%. I talked about that yesterday, and it's so important, folks. This idea of in diet and anything in your life to just get this 10-year plan and implement it 100% all at one time, you're going to fail. That is a guarantee. You're going to fail, and depending on how badly you fail, you're going to start feeling like a failure, and you're going to be discouraged. And what's sad about it, and Anton just alluded to it, it's going to set up a spiraling cycle in your body and in your mind and your whole makeup that you don't need. So approaching it with a 10% principle of, okay, like Anton said, for next week or so, I'm going to just add in a good favorite colorful vegetable, whatever that is. I don't think anybody doesn't have at least one favorite colorful vegetable. So just say, hey, I'm going to make it a point to include that with each of my meals over the next few weeks. And once you do that, let that have its effect. And once you have that effect, then you can then just start developing your baseline. There is, people want to get, what is it? Get slim by the summer to look good in the bathing suit. Starting that in May is not the way to do it. In fact, you should be starting that right after the prior summer and work on a balanced approach and go 10% so that by the next summer you will have potentially impacted your appearance. And just so you know, there isn't a perfect appearance, just for the record. I know some of you find that hard to believe, but chasing an appearance is not the ticket. I have watched some of the healthiest looking people out there, no body fat, no anything, and keel over with heart attacks or be depressed, in a bad state, whatever. So don't keep chasing that perfect physical. It doesn't exist. And people that are driven that way end up like what Aaron was talking about, with wrong attitudes and problems with how they approach food. Welcome, Sharon. Glad to have you with us.
And
So,
that's why, you'll never hear us on the show say how to eat to lose weight, how to eat to have a six pack. Like, you're just never going to see that. It's never going to be something that I or Kev will ever talk about. If you notice peak performance, chase peak performance. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, because it's the right, you're not going to have this external wrong view of yourself. It's chasing internal performance. What I also want to remind people is with these diets and all these things that people do, it's thinking about what does it do to you psychologically. When you try to bring on so many changes at once, not knowing that you were destined to fail from the onset, from the beginning, before you even started, by picking too many changes at once, you are destined to fail. And without realizing that, you go on this journey and you try to make changes, you try to eat better, you try to be healthier. All of a sudden you fail and you go, I'm a failure. You do that a couple times, all of a sudden, what kind of association do you now have with food? Do you have a good feeling about it to where I'm in control? I am able to put into my body what my body needs, or I'm a failure. I can't control what I put in my mouth. Why bother? I'm just going to stop caring. I've seen this happen way too many times. And it's not because there's anything wrong with you. It's because you just picked something that was way too much change at once. The statistics are different. Depends on, once again, who you talk to, but around 85% success rate if you change one thing about yourself. This is where this whole 10% concept comes from, and I'll tell you the other part of it in a second. If you change two things at once, you're looking at about 35% success rate. If you change three things or more, 5 to 10% or less, somewhere in that category. So that's why finding the right best change, sitting down and saying, okay, here's all the different things I could change about myself for my nutrition, for my health and things like that. Let's find the one that's going to be the most impactful and then stick to it. So that's one half of the 10% thing. The other half is it came from a study that I read a while ago, and it wasn't like a super deep study. It was about 1,000 people that were studied in a one year weight loss program. So there was three different groups, and group one was 100% compliant. Right. These people did everything they were supposed to do, couldn't ask them to do anything better, the perfectionists of the world, right? For a year. They lost between men and women somewhere between 25 to 29 pounds. The second group was 50% compliant. So they did about half of what they were told to do. And these people lost somewhere around like 15 to 20 pounds. The other group was only 10% compliant, right? They only did 10% of everything that they were supposed to do in this perfect plan, but they still ended up losing 9 to 13 pounds. So almost half of what they lost, of what the perfect group lost, right? And I'm using weight loss just as an example because that's what the study was. It's not necessarily what I'm saying I'm after, but my eyes really opened up to it. And I said, why is it that those people that only did 1/10 but got one half of the results? Consistency. That's the number one thing that we need to derive from that. And why 10% is based on such a small number. What can you do consistently and sustain it over a long period of time? So that when you start to see the benefits, you start to get addicted to the good. You start to, prove to yourself that you can achieve these things. You start to have positive association with your nutrition and things like that. So that's why these small yet mighty changes are so impactful and powerful.
It's the whole concept of that first step. If you tried, I thinking, my mind goes to construction, and if you have a first step that's 4 feet high, you're going to have a hard time getting that first step. If you have a first step at the normal 7 to 8 inches, then you are making progress towards your upward goal, and you're doing it safely, and you're doing it in a way that is sustainable because you can repeat that step after step after step versus trying to leap 3 or 4 foot steps each time. You're talking, if you get to the top of the step, then you got to recover and deal with your injuries and all that. Zaid makes a good analogy. I really like that, talking about 10%. Imagine if it worked, they press for so much change at one time. Boy, if we were in an office and they came in and said, okay, well, yesterday you were doing A, B, and C. Well, today you're doing X, Y, and Z going forward. There would be such wailing and complaining. It wouldn't.
It's common though. It's so common. I mean, this is how so many businesses operate. But that's why this new field of change management has came around. Right. This is actually what I do for a living now. For my day job, and something that Perspective Force can help with, specifically the stress aspect of it. But change management is huge. It's understanding. I'll give you this analogy that I was just talking to about the other day. You have a water slide, right? So you're trying to get your team down this water slide. But if we're not taking care of the water slide, if we're changing these slides all the time, like we're not maintaining them, yeah, they may get down there, but how they get down there with bumps, bruises, and things like that, or scrapes, rash, that's to be told. And that's what the companies are focused on all the time. Like, we're just going to build a water slide, and then we're going to build the next water slide, and then we're going to do the next one and a bigger one. But the thing is, nobody's considering the human beings in their transition from that top of the slide to the bottom. Change management is the water. It's adding the water to the water slide. Make sure there is enough water for all the people on the slide, and people are smoothly gliding down to their destination at the speed that they need to get down there. So that is a huge one. That field is going to blow up. It's been blowing up in the last 10 years, and it's only going to grow. You're going to see change management be in every large organization if it's not already. Because Zaid, you're spot on. That's happening all the time. You have these projects that are technically sound. Everything's good. We've hit our milestones, but no user adoption. People are still sticking to their old ways because they're just experienced too much change, and they're like, nope, I'm not doing it. I'm becoming resistant. So the word for that is change saturation. That's, if anybody's struggling with that, go research change saturation and see how that impacts teams and, why it's such a problem. But I know, Kev, we got to wrap up early today.
We got to call it early. a little bit early today. Life is creating challenges for both of us. Good challenges, thankfully. But so key takeaways, first of all, is 10%. Okay. Gotta consider 10% in terms of modifying our diet, make it sustainable. Um, what else would you throw out as kind of some key takeaways there, Andon?
Chase the positive. Instead
Oh
of
yeah.
trying to avoid things, chase what you should be having instead, right? That's a big one.
Okay. And then I was thinking about your water slide analogy, great analogy. Everybody gets to the bottom. Question is, what condition, and do they drown when they get to the bottom? As you look at your diet, find a baseline. Also, don't accept good. We've been living with good too long. And in fact, by staying at good, things have to get really bad for us to consider change. And at that point, the problem is so advanced, recovery is even harder. So by staying at excellent, when you get off a little bit, it's easier to address the problem because you're still above good, and the solutions are much more amenable. So look at as you look at your new year coming. Okay, think about your diet, be intentional, find your baseline, start there, and use a couple of baseline things. If nothing else, Rick has said he's drinking some more water even as we speak. So, start there. If that can be your 10%, start there. Get your right amount of water going for the new year.
Let's talk about goal setting and resolutions
Okay.
next week. I think the timing for that will be good. We'll talk. I'll talk to you folks about how I've set goals with clients for a really long time, and that most of our goals are really kind of not done well. We're trying to do the 4-foot step instead of taking the 5 to 7 inches one. So let's dive into that next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone. God bless. Have a great week. We'll see you next Tuesday at 8:00, and we'll talk about goal setting and how to be realistic with that and do a good job. So thanks, everybody. Take care. Talk to you later. Bye.